When you think of a prenup, you might think of how things are going to get split up in the event that you divorce. And that's generally true. That's one of the main things that a prenup does. But it's also important to take a step back and think about what that really means. For example, when you get married, you're opting into a set of laws that you may not be familiar with. For example, say you get married in Connecticut and you kind of generally know something about how divorce works here, but then later on you move to a different state, not thinking about what would happen if your marriage ended by being in that state at all. That's something that you wouldn't even consider. Well, one of the things that a prenup does is it lets you pre-decide how you would like to treat each other, how you'd like to treat your partner, and how you'd like to be treated by your partner in the event that you decide to end your marriage down the line. One of the things that's really important about that is that when people get married, even if they have no intention to move and they're going to live in the same state their entire lives from when they get married to when they wind up getting a divorce, the truth is that a lot of people don't really know what it would mean in terms of a divorce. They might not really have thought about how alimony works. They might not have thought about how property division would work if they decided down the line to get divorced. With a prenup, it puts the power in the hands of the two people who are getting married, and it allows them to pre-decide what they want their lives to look like should their marriage down the line end. And it can come from a very loving place because they're in the process of building a life together. And so how they feel about how they want to treat their partner or how they want to be treated by their partner can come from a real place of abundance. In some cases, prenups are really valuable for protecting assets that are particularly meaningful to you or your partner. So let's think of an example. A kind of classic is a family business or a closely held business that one of the future spouses is a partner in. So in Connecticut, for example, we think of when we divide property in a sort of equitable way, right? It's not 50% of everything or 60% of everything. It's not that clear. But all property is subject to division unless a judge decides to exclude it or unless the divorcing spouses decide to exclude it. Well, imagine a scenario where there's something that you really want to make sure stays with the spouse in the event of a divorce, a family business, a trust, something like that. Well, you can pre-decide to do that and delineate it in a prenup. And as long as both sides are very comfortable that it's fair and have met with an attorney to review it, and perhaps more of something else goes to the person that is giving up any entitlement to the asset that you're trying to make sure stays with the spouse, well, a prenup is a really great planning tool to do that. In some cases, it's also possible to do it in a postnup, but the best course of action and our gold standard advice is if you want to really be deliberate about how you structure assets to make sure things stay with the person that it's most important that for the two of you to keep those things with, well, then a prenup is the best way to go. The big granddaddy myth about prenups is that if you do a prenup, it means that you're heading straight for divorce. It means that one person is already leaning out of the marriage. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. What prenups are for is for people who want to deliberately decide how financials would work in the event of a divorce. And one of the things that's very interesting is that when people go through the discussion about how they want their financial lives to look in the event of a divorce, it's very informative for their marriage as well. It helps people understand the different stories that each partner has about money. These stories come from society, they come from our cultural backgrounds, they come from how we were parented and how our families felt about money. And having those kinds of discussions, which frankly aren't things that most people that are getting married that aren't on the top of their mind, prenups can really set up a strong marriage because of the conversations about financials that happen in the context of getting one. And of course, in my opinion, Having control over what something would look like in the future is always a huge advantage. So with a prenup, you're not stuck with the default of the state laws wherever you might happen to end your marriage down the line if you choose to. You're opting into a structure that the two of you have decided on, which is a really powerful way to start a future together. When we are in the process of creating a prenup, there are some steps that we always want you to take. Well, in Connecticut, one of the things that's really important is that both sides make the decisions about the prenup with their eyes wide open. And so Connecticut does a few things to make sure that that happens. One, we want everyone to have a lawyer. Even though the two of you are getting along beautifully and you're about to get married, you should each have the benefit of your own independent attorney who's giving you advice on the meaning of the decisions you're making. Again, the point is eyes wide open. The other thing we want to make sure that exists in a prenup is that there's a full exchange of financial documents. So you'll share all your financials with your spouse, and they'll share all their financials with you. This may seem a little odd because maybe you share a bank account, maybe you're familiar with what your fiance makes at work and all of that stuff, but the truth is that putting it down in a formal way where you can really look apples to apples at both people's financial situation can really set you up to make really good decisions for the two of you, decisions you're confident in. Both of the things that I'm saying are very good because we want people to have control and knowledge and insights before they make these really important decisions. But there's another thing about them. The reason Connecticut wants this full and fair disclosure, access to each person having access to their own independent attorney, well, those are the things that tend to support down the line a court wanting to enforce the prenup. Because what the court can do is look back on the circumstances when you were entering into the prenup, make sure that someone didn't shove it in someone else's face on the way down the aisle, that you had time to think about it, that you had the benefit of speaking with an attorney about it, and that you really had a full disclosure of assets to consider. Those two things set you up to make good decisions, and they set up an enforceable prenup down the line. If you have any more questions about prenups, and listen, there are a lot. There's a lot to a prenup. It's a big decision, but I think it's a really smart decision. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to fill you in. If there's anything you're wondering about or any myths that you're not sure of, give us a call.